first year, no one has confused me for Jeff Cross. So he was trying his hardest to get me to shave into a mustache, but I'm going to keep with the beard. Now, I already asked one person earlier, who was writing software in like the early 2000s? Show of hands, anybody? Does anyone remember this amazing thing? Oh, this was like the best way to build cool things in probably like 2004, 2005. Memory's a little fuzzy on release dates. But this was Flash. Flash was an amazing technology because it allowed you to build not only animations, movies. We had people who worked for Disney using Flash to make cool independent projects. But it gave you this thing up here at the top, a timeline. A timeline was pretty awesome because if you had a shape or an object and you wanted to move it across into a different position, you literally go to the frame that you want it to be at, move it, right click, and then say, create animation tween. There we go. We could have a circle on one side of the screen and then make it go to the other side of the screen. Easy. Didn't have to program the animation, didn't have to do the step-by-step movement. Want to change a shape? You could do that too. You had all this power inside of a single program that I will miss dearly. I will forever miss it. But we're starting to get some of this capability actually in the web right now. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about view transitions. Show of hands, who knows what view transitions is? Yeah. A few, okay. We're going to look at what they are, how they work inside of Angular, and why we should be paying attention to them. So for the uninitiated, the folks who didn't raise their hands, what are view transitions? And if we have a very technical definition of what they are an API for providing, or an API that provides a mechanism for easily creating animated transitions between different DOM states, while also updating the DOM contents in a single step. That's a really verbose way of saying, you change the DOM, it'll animate the difference between the two states. Perfect, great. What does that actually mean? Let's take this little example. We have an unordered list, we have a couple items, maybe we want to remove an item. With view transitions, we can coordinate this, so anytime we remove an item from this list, we can animate that change. That way, all of our list items gently move up, and we can track how items are being added and removed from the DOM. So I got a couple examples, but first, we're going to look at the basics of this. What do we want to do if we just want to start adding animations? We actually have a hook in here called start view transitions. Anytime we call this, anything that happens in that callback will automatically track the difference in the two DOM states. So we call start view transitions, we modify the DOM, we add something, we remove it, we change a class, we change some elements around. Once that callback has been called, start view transitions will automatically track that. And so we have an example here where we have a container. It is literally a grid where we just have a single box in here, and we are randomly setting property alignments. But what's good to know is that on line 16, we have document start view transition, and we're just randomly selecting it. So what do you think is going to happen? The square gently fades around. We are changing grid alignment properties, which are not things that you should be able to animate. And it just works. We don't have to do anything extra. But we could take it a step further. We could start to pull out elements that we want the browser to track as we start to change the contents of our DOM. So in this case, we have a box. We're going to just give this thing called view transition name. As the start view transitions API is called, the browser will pull out this box and elevate it to a different status and be able to give you the before and after of the before and after states and allow you to control how that animates. So all we did, it's the same exact demo, just give it a name. This blew my mind. For folks who, you're not clapping, I don't think you understand what's happening here. Animating alignment and having this happen like that is something that used to take loads of web animation and being able to position things absolute and then transform it. I gave a talk last year where I talked about flip animations. All that code now can be thrown out. View transitions handles this perfectly, which is amazing. And it can also handle things that you might not think you should be able to do. Animating display none. We can actually hook into the old and new states and listen for when we only have an old element. Basically, if we have old and it's the only thing in our transition hierarchy, we can say scale it out. It essentially means that we are removing an element from the DOM or setting display none. If we only have a new child, that means we're inserting something into the DOM. We should animate it appropriately. Now, this is a great demo from a friend of mine named Adam Argyle. Shout out to Adam. He schooled me all on view transitions, but he has this thing where, what if we want to animate the alignment property and order property of all these boxes? We can do that. And we have some pretty cool easings that are using a pretty advanced linear function for their timing. What if we want to animate display none? The amount of code that you would have had to write to do this with just JavaScript there's reasons why people use GreenSock, because it handles this for you. You don't need JavaScript now to do this. You can just use CSS, which is a far better approach to handling this kind of transition, in my opinion. So what I was talking about in this kind of view hierarchy, when we call start view transition, the browser goes ahead and takes a snapshot of the entire DOM. It looks for things that have a view transition name, and then it creates these groups. If we go inside the different groups, we get a pair, and then we get an old and new, basically state and snapshot of the elements that have been matched. It's essentially just a static image, but we get to do some cool things with that. So all of this is actually stored in the DOM, and you can inspect this and see the different animations, open up DevTools, inspect the animation over the timeline, and all you have to do is start view transitions. Adam has an amazing talk that you should just go watch. YouTube, Adam Argyle, view transitions, you'll find it eventually. But he goes into some pretty advanced and custom implementations where he talks about multi-page view transitions a little bit more. We're going to focus solely on single-page applications. So, and we're going to look at this through the context of Angular. Because Angular has an animations API, right? Who's actually written Angular animations? Who enjoyed that experience? I don't mean to disparage it. It is actually a really, really cool API. And so what we're going to do real quick is we're actually just going to write some Angular animations. So let's go to our app. We have a list over here. We can just say it's using an unordered list, and we're iterating over everything. What if we wanted to animate when we added a new item to this list? Well, first we bring in a list animation or an animation trigger, and we're going to call it list animation. And it's going to be fired every time the length of our list of to-dos has changed, whether it's increasing or decreasing. If we come down to our animations, we can see we actually had that already filled out, where we had the animations array, our trigger, and then we are listening to the increment, so whenever the list increases, and decrement whenever the list decreases. Let's start doing whenever an element enters. And so we're going to use that :enter syntax to listen for that specific item. And then we're going to first set off some default styles. We're basically going to move it up 100%. Tape moved. We're going to move it up 100% so that way it appears underneath the previous element. And then we're just going to animate that down so that way it appears like it naturally just falls into this DOM. What about when we want to remove an element? Well, we listen for that using the :leaves selector, and we're just going to fade it out. But we can take it a step further and actually combine those using a adjacent sibling selector. That's that little tilde right in the middle, where you can say, look for the leaving element and then its subsequent siblings. And just move those up to the missing spot. So all of that together gives us this. Here's our list. We're animating things in. It looks really good. We can actually click the trash can, have the leaving element fade out. We can move the elements back up so that way we create a nice context. This is not doing crazy animations where the whole entire page is flipping around. This is providing meaningful context to when state changes inside of your app. And demo just in case that failed. But we're looking at view transitions right now because that is what I think is one of the cooler things. So let's go back to our terminal. And we're going to do this inside, sneak peek. We're going to do this inside of a new page. Markup is still exactly the same, but we have a few things that we need to watch out for. So let's go ahead and coordinate this by just adding style binding using the view transition name. Now, what's important here is that we are concatenating a prefix with a random ID. View transition names need to be unique. If you have two elements in the DOM that have the same name, the browser will just opt out and throw an error and say, hey, we can't animate this. We don't know which one is our single source of truth. So we're going to add this in here. And then anytime we want to go ahead and modify this, we'll wrap our implementations using start view transitions. And for the most part, this just works with one little caveat, and that is change detection. Change detection in this case means that when we go ahead and actually run the animation, we need to tell Angular that, hey, something happened, trigger the view transitions. And that can be as simple as going into your service that is handling this and ref.tick. You could do it more fancy using an effect. You could wrap this in ng-zone. Probably don't wrap it in ng-zone, but this works. This gives us the same exact effect of just saying, hey, trigger change detection for us. What do we have when we have that? We have the same animations working, and we can delete those elements too. And the order of those elements moving up to their new position is handled automatically. I don't have to do any of that. Now, with the animations here, we are using CSS, which is a really good use case for this. We are doing dynamically generated view transition names here, so this is where we're going to get a little squirrely. We have to select everything. Because we don't know what those animation names are going to be at runtime, we're just going to do a global select. It's probably not a good practice to do this, but we're going to do it anyway. We'll give it a default timing function, duration, blend mode, overflow, and then we're going to pull in some animations. I'm using this library called OpenProps, super cool. It has a bunch of pre-built animations in there, so that way you just reference a CSS variable. You don't really care what the animation is doing. You just have an animation for you. And for every new element that we are adding, we're going to slide this down. And for every old one, we'll fade it out. Now, all this together leads to a fun question of how does this integrate with the router? If we think view transitions, we might think of how do we change and animate going from page 1 in our app to page 2. There's actually support for this in the router, which is really cool. Merged in last year. What's really nice about this is that if we wanted to do this, all we had to do is actually add in this with view transitions feature to our provide routers. Once we do that, the router will go ahead and actually select everything and tell the browser to run this inside of a start view transition. But this is where we get into some quirks. This is just from changing routes, and we can actually see this in the demo. Let's just add a bunch of items here. Okay, I'm on this page. What do you think is going to happen when we go to view transitions or change routes? We have an unnecessary animation playing inside of our app. Now, this is because view transitions actually act at a global scale, almost, or global context. We can think about it. Anytime you call start view transition inside of your code, it's going to look for everything, which may not be what you want. In this case, I only want to animate the root and the main, but I'm still picking up all of the to-dos that I provided with our view transition name. So this is kind of problematic unless that's the kind of design you want to go for. The good thing here is that view transitions, the authors about this have actually known about this issue for some time, and they're coming up with this concept called scope transitions, where view transitions happen at a global context. Scope transitions can be scoped to an individual element, so you could say, my box, I'm going to trigger the view transition, and it's only going to affect the children of that element, which makes it a lot easier to reason about as things are animating. And you can scope it that way if I'm animating everything from the root or from the global context, don't animate any of its children. So we now have two different ways to do animations, right? We have a CSS only, which is my preferred way. We have a JavaScript approach, which has been battle tested, well maintained over the number of years, and is supported by the core team. What option are you going to pick? Core team? No, you're wrong. In my opinion only. I don't think that's actually something that should be, you're not wrong. But view transitions are incredibly powerful and something that are very future-facing. It's supported right now in Chromium browsers, but Firefox and WebKit have actually cited support and started going through the implementation process for this. You can actually open up Safari Tech Preview if you're on a Mac and actually see, enable the flag for it. It doesn't do anything, but it's in the browser, so that's a good indicator. But your Angular animation skills are actually going to be super valuable. Because we have a way to scope animations using the Angular API, we can kind of mix both of these and have a great sense of when to use one versus the other. So view transitions, like I said, they operate on a global context. It's going to affect the whole entire DOM, especially if you are just trying to change routes. Anything that subsequently has a view transition name will be affected by that. Angular animations, on the other hand, can be scoped to a particular element. You can have it only affect when you want it or when something happens in a particular context, which is super useful. And if you kind of read the tea leaves a little bit or maybe hope and send some pull requests, go contribute to Angular, maybe Angular animations could support scope transitions in the future. Who knows? I would love to see that. But we can actually see how this would work in our app. The good place. Let's go to our app again. So this is the same exact app, but we have scoped it to only use view transitions for one part of it and Angular for the other part. You can see as we navigate routes, we have a tasteful animation on the title to just automatically expand when we have a longer title. But we also have that indicator that is moving across different elements. And actually, the view transition name is being applied only when the list item is selected. Our Angular animations are still controlling and driving the list animations, so we're having a much more isolated context. And if we open up the DevTools, let's go ahead and slow this down. We can start to inspect all of these animations as if they're just regular animations happening in the browser. What's really fun is this one. Watching the morph between the two titles, I could literally sit here all day just do that. Animations will do that to you. Cool. So all of these together give us a better app, meaningful context changes, but using the right API for the right thing. View transitions are super powerful, and I've literally only scratched the surface of what you can do with them, but it's kind of up to you to figure out what do you want your view transitions to do. Do you want them to do the 3D cube effect, or do you just want to provide a little animation when something gets added to the cart? Now, you could go check out view transitions in depth if you actually want to listen and read some spec information on GitHub. That's how I spend my Friday nights. There's also a bunch of great resources out there if you just Google view transitions. I couldn't give you a whole list of them because it would take up the entire slide. But start off with the spec if you want. Go on to different explainers. There's also a really great blog post from Andrew on the Angular team about how the animation or view transitions have been integrated into the router with some really good demos in there too. Very tasteful. And with that, thank you so much. Go animate things.